25-30, 35-40, 45-50, 45. There goes Davis. Oh, my God. Davis is going to run it all the way back. Auburn's going to win the football game.
They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. All the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone.
Four-man Alabama rush. Got him. No, they didn't. Oh, my gracious.
Yep.
How about that?
Ooh, I told you guys that week 3 was not going to be some snooze fest, one that we just sleepily got through and looked forward to a loaded week 4, week 5. No, week 3 gave us plenty of drama, plenty of storylines, and we're going to break it all down here on our week 3 live show, the 3 Technique College Football Podcast at the intersection of the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes. With Trey Reeves, Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Glad to have you hanging out with us late this Saturday night. Gentlemen, LSU survives. Billy Napier needs to go. It's a reset in Tallahassee. We've got a lot to talk about tonight, but first and foremost, the number 1 team in the country, the Georgia Bulldogs, just almost lost to what I still believe to be a pretty terrible Kentucky team. That game just went final 13-12. Live react to that. Trey, let's start with you. This game was tough to watch. Georgia suddenly looks extremely mortal.
Yeah, sometimes games like that, you come away really impressed with the defenses, right? You're like, wow, that was a great defensive struggle. There's tons of NFL talent all over the field. Didn't really feel that way in this low-scoring one. Impressed with Georgia keeping Kentucky out of the end zone. You're always happy when you can do that, but man, just a lot to be desired from that offensive effort. Just really seemed like they could never get anything going. Kentucky, to their credit, they play Georgia relatively close. And I think we were sleeping on that a little bit in the preview. Past few years, they played Georgia a little closer than some other teams, especially in the old SEC East. So not as surprised that it was a closer game than the spread, but man, just a really lackluster effort, especially when you think about the number 2 team in the nation nipping at their heels, ready to get them at home in a few weeks, that just keeps putting on great performance after great performance, no matter who's playing quarterback.
Yeah, this series, I believe Kentucky had kept it to one score or something like 10 points. 3 of the last 4 times they'd played in Lexington. I could be butchering that stat, but yeah, historically Kentucky plays them close at home. Trade to the other side of your point. I thought those Kentucky teams were better than this Kentucky team. Brock Vandagriff looked terrible last week. The offensive line couldn't stop an 8th grader. And I really felt like I was looking for an identity after that whooping that they took at the hands of South Carolina last week. Garrett, it felt like Georgia, despite all of that, really never got any momentum going. Carson Beck looks tremendously average. I think out of a lot of quarterbacks who have seen their stock plummet in the upcoming NFL draft, Carson Beck to me is one of them. I don't think he brings anything special to the table. And boy, 15-24 for 160, no touchdowns, didn't turn the ball over, but averaging just 6.7 yards a completion. That is not going to get it done on what is a loaded schedule still ahead for the Bulldogs.
You're definitely right about that. I mean, Carson Beck, the thing is, he's not a bad quarterback. He's just not really bringing anything special to the table right now. And I hate to draw the comparison, but we could have a Kyle McCord situation unfolding in front of us where, you know, you have a team that's stacked with talent. You have a team that's really, really good, but just the quarterback play being average to slightly above average just isn't going to get it done, right? It's going to ultimately hinder the ultimate cap on that team, especially when you think about Georgia's schedule right now. Like, I don't want to say Carson Beck can't improve, because I think we all acknowledge, like, he's got the talent. He can do it. But, you know, a couple games now into the season, not looking like he really made that big step in the right direction. So kind of an issue there. Also, another issue I wanted to point out here, they got kind of outrushed by a fairly, you know, wide margin. Kentucky ran for 170, Georgia only 102. That's not Georgia football, right? Like, we're kind of used to just watching Georgia get up there, line up, and kind of smash you in the mouth and do whatever they want. Not the case this evening. Definitely an escape situation. And you know what I say? I always say you get one, right? You get one game where you don't get to look your best and you get to kind of sit there and do that. Well, Georgia just burned theirs, and they've certainly done that in the past, right? They had their one against Missouri a couple of years ago. They still went on to win the championship, so that's fine. But yeah, you get one game to not be your best. And I guess Georgia's going to burn this right now before they start to get the doubts coming in. So maybe it's just a weird night at Kentucky, and it's a weird night in a blue place. But, maybe this is just a situation where Georgia's got to figure out a way to bounce back and move forward. Because you guys are right. I mean, they've got a tough schedule. They got a meeting with Texas coming up and a bunch of other difficult games on their schedule remaining. So Carson Beck's got to find a way to make a difference if they're not going to be able to be that dominant in the run game. I think they can do it. We just really haven't seen it yet.
I don't think it's really all on Carson Beck, guys. I'll defend him just a little bit before we move on. I think he's just got to figure out who his go-to receivers are. And this was kind of the first.
Yep.
He moved the ball relatively easily a couple weeks ago against a good Clemson defense. I think Clemson's defense is better than Kentucky's.
Yep.
It was in a neutral site. It wasn't a true road game like this one was. But yeah, I'll defend Carson Beck just a little bit. I don't know that he's like a Heisman caliber crazy stats, like he will ever put the game completely on his shoulders. He might. I think we've seen him do it a couple times in his career, but I don't think if this is the low bar for him, I think Georgia will take that because I think they have enough talent on the defensive side of the ball to make most teams kind of look like Kentucky did tonight. And he didn't put them in position to lose. It was kind of a total offensive effort, including the quarterback, that had them kind of in jeopardy tonight.
Well, Georgia only runs for 3.4 a carry tonight on 30
That's the more
attempts.
concerning thing for me.
That is certainly the more concerning thing. They did lose, I believe, Tate Rutledge, their right guard. He went down with what they called both a left ankle and a left knee injury. So suddenly some injury bugs maybe biting along the offensive line. And penalties were an issue for Georgia as well. 9 for 85 penalties across the league. There were some gaudy numbers when you looked into the box score. They also lose the time of possession by 11 minutes to Kentucky. So yeah, not anything that makes me think that, okay, they're going to go out and lose to, Mississippi State in a couple of weeks, but their next 4 at Alabama versus Auburn versus Mississippi State and at Texas. It's not necessarily a stretch that you don't want to be playing your best football heading into. I know Alabama they got off to a slow start up in Wisconsin. We'll talk about that game later on in the show, but Tuscaloosa is going to be rocking for that one. And it feels like Georgia maybe isn't as buttoned up and consistent as what we've come to expect. So we'll keep our eyes on Georgia next week. Certainly I'm sure that game will be our game of the week. We'll see where Georgia ends up landing in the AP rankings after a lackluster performance. Let's go to LSU in South Carolina. The Tigers, 7.5, 6.5 point favorites, depending on when you got them, where you got them as well. Oh boy, they get out of the cockpit with a 3-point win. And I tell you what, this was a absolute survival for the Tigers. They were down by 17 at 2 different points in this ball game, Trey. 17-0 and then 24-7 as well. Give me your overall thoughts from watching this game. And I want to know, despite the win, is Brian Kelly's temperature rising after this game? Because I had some texts and DMs asking if Brian Kelly would start feeling that pressure by halftime.
Well, at halftime, his seat was certainly extremely hot. I think he cooled it off just a little bit by finding a way to win the game. But guys, is it possible to come out of a game just really unimpressed with both teams?
Yes.
Because that's how I'm walking away from this one. I'm still not sold on South Carolina. There's a lot of truthers that came out of the woodwork this week for the Gamecocks. And I know you got to hype up a big game, but like the media blitz of truthers about South Carolina this week were just really odd to me when you dug into the advanced analytics about their win versus Kentucky. Now that win against Kentucky certainly aged well tonight, but I'm still not sold on what they're doing offensively to be a consistent threat against teams that are better than LSU defensively. And I'm really not sold on what LSU has defensively. Like, we've beaten that dead horse multiple times on this show. So I'm I mean, you look at South Carolina, they blew multiple big leads, like you talked about, Mitch. They had a pick six that they could have walked into the end zone with at the end of the game, and they blow it by taking a cheap shot on Garrett Nussmeier.
Yep.
Like that's just an inexcusable penalty in a big situation. And for LSU, you're extremely happy to get the win and you're getting the heck out of town, but way more questions than you have answers, and you're not even to the most difficult part of your schedule yet.
We've harped on the LSU secondary, and they weren't bad in pass coverage necessarily because South Carolina didn't throw the football. They threw it for 155 total yards. LaNorris Sellers gets hurt in this game. Robbie Ashford has to finish it off. He only attempts 4 passes. I mean, he's basically a pair of legs out there. He had 11 carries and only 4 pass attempts. So
and Sellers came back, right? He was just really hobbled.
But Ashford was finishing that game out. I don't think, Sellers didn't finish that game, kind of came back and then was just ineffective. So South Carolina had to go on the ground, and LSU knew they were going to run it. Everybody in the stadium knew they were going to run it. And Rocket Sanders finishes with 19 carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. LaNorris, when he was healthy, 10 runs, 88 yards. I think most of that was on the 75 yard touchdown run that he had. He had 2 rushing scores as well. But 243 yards given up on the ground for LSU. Even the commentators were saying that, Harold Perkins, again, disappeared at times. Of course, as soon as they mention that, he comes up, I believe, with the strip sack in the second half there. But tell me about LSU. I mean, Trey, you're not impressed. Garrett, what did you take away from this game, and where does LSU go from here?
I mean, I think the good news for LSU is you can say that you're resilient because you found a way to battle back and win this game when, honestly, you probably really shouldn't have. I mean, let's face it, I think if Sellers didn't get hurt, he's probably a much bigger factor in this game and ends up probably winning this game. And I think a lot of LSU fans are probably a little bit grateful he wasn't a factor to finish this game off. And that's why you ended up coming in and winning this game at the end. I mean, this was so close and, kind of out of hand that I saw that there are students running down from the top deck to get ready to rush the field before LSU ended up coming down and scoring to win that game. So, look, I mean, I think at the end of the day, LSU, you could say that you're resilient. That's a good, check in your box, and that's appreciated. And I think that there's a lot of really good things you could take away. Caden Durham had a really good game, couple touchdowns, almost 100 yards rushing. Really made the most of his opportunities. Nussmeier, certainly not, his best day in the whole world, but still a respectable day, 24-40, 285, 2 touchdowns. So, he kind of bounced back, battled, found a way to make it work when it wasn't his best day in the whole world. I mean, at the end of the day, when you're playing in the SEC, you have to find ways to make it work when it's not your day, right? You have to find ways to do kind of what Georgia did, where, it wasn't Georgia's day, but they found a way to win. LSU certainly not playing as poorly as Georgia in this one, but they did find a way to win. They found a way to bounce back and come out on top. And so I think it's something to build on. I don't think that if you're an LSU fan, you're feeling super comfortable right now, because I think as much as we want to say South Carolina's having a cool story with Sellers, they're not going to be top of the SEC. And you got a lot of people on your schedule that are probably going to knock you down a peg or two if you don't find a way to play better football going forward. So don't think it's panic time. I think a lot of LSU fans, I think a lot of teams this week can kind of find themselves in this spot where they're saying, well, you know what? Survive in advance, keep progressing, keep getting better. And, at least, we won this week and we didn't, drop this one before we found a way to make our team better. So I think LSU is in pretty good company there with a lot of teams saying, at least we won. Let's find ways to improve because this ain't going to get it done for the rest of the season.
I'll push back a little bit on Nussmeier. So, and this was something that I've noticed from both their fans and from the broadcast. Nussmeier goes 24-40, 285, 2 touchdowns, a really bad interception. I mean, really he missed the safety, sliding underneath a little cover 3 there, or not cover 3, cover 2 hard flat. I don't know how he missed that safety, but Nussmeier, I think, is a very solid quarterback. Is he going to win a Heisman like Jayden Daniels? No. Is he going to be the weapon with the legs? No. But what I'm tired of hearing about is that he's not Jayden Daniels. I mean, the TV broadcast mentioned it over and over again. Kurt could not tell you enough times once LSU got down in the red zone, hey, by the way, this isn't their Heisman quarterback from last year. And it seems like that's been the national narrative that I've read as well, that somehow LSU, whenever LSU is in a tight game, and it's only been 3 games, but when they've had offensive struggles, when they didn't get it done against USC, when they were struggling to pull away from Nichols, in this game, obviously having to come down from a big deficit, the instant like Band-Aid over the situation, the reach for this excuse is, well, he's not Daniels. He doesn't have the legs. Yeah, and you've known about that as a coaching staff for an entire offseason. The game plan shouldn't be the same. So for me, I think Nussmeier's doing a fine job. Sometimes you don't know where the ball is going with him, but we knew that coming into the offseason as well. To me, this all comes back on the coaching. I haven't been impressed with any of the coaching that LSU has displayed this season, from managing the clock against USC to late game situation against South Carolina. Like Trey, you said earlier, there is multiple ways that LSU should have lost this game despite coming back. Overall, I think the talent for LSU is fine. Caden Durham is a new face in that running back room, 11 for 98 and 2 touchdowns. How you doing, Mr. Duncanville Panther? I think LSU is fine. They've got the bodies, but over and over again, I keep coming back to the fact that, much like Florida, which we'll talk about in just a second, guys are in the wrong position at the wrong time, and they're not being used to the best of their ability. For me, as just a unbiased third party that's, not sitting in the coaching room every day, I put this more on the coaches than the players.
Well, and I think the reason they keep bringing up Jaden Daniels is to remind everyone how much of the running game that LSU is losing when they lose a guy like Jaden Daniels, right? Because what was it, like 60 or 70% of their rushing yards last year that he accounted for, mostly on scrambles?
And they were mostly big scrambles too.
And they were big chunk scrambles. And when that was your offense, plain and simply, that was what kept the offense moving most of the time last year, the last 2 years. It's a big difference. It's a big change when you have to figure out a way without that. So I'm glad you brought up Caden Durham, because I think that's a big bright spot for LSU going forward. One of the big things that I was concerned through 2 weeks is they just didn't have a guy on the ground in the running back position that looked like the guy that could get those yards when they needed it. Don't think Nussmeier is that guy consistently. I don't think he's as durable as Jaden Daniels if they want to run him as much as him. And they need to have that guy on the ground. Maybe it's Caden Durham. I think he ran off some big long runs today, and he looked really good doing it. I think almost 9 yards a carry by the end of the day. So good looking out for there, but they had not had that before today, and it was the biggest thing. It looked like they were going to get it with John Emery, and then they lose him for the year. So that's just bad luck. And now maybe they have that going forward, but maybe that's a South Carolina rushing defense that's not going to be as good as the rest of the schedule. So big thing they got to still figure out.
See, I want to jump in and defend him just a little bit more, because you're right that he's getting unfairly criticized. There's also not like a Malik Neighbors or a Brian Thomas Jr. in this wide receiver room right now. Like, Kyron Lacy's a good receiver, but I don't think that they have guys at that caliber. And it's unfair to say that, like, oh, you get to watch 2 guys walk out of that room that are, first round guys, highly competitive, NFL level type guys. If those guys walk out of your room, you're going to lose that production in the pass game as well, because it's just like, fact of the matter is, you're going to drop off in production. There can be guys that come in and fill the shoes and even do a good job. But again, like, this isn't to criticize any of them. The big criticism for LSU needs to come on the fact that their defense needs to find a way to stop anybody, because this was a problem for them last year. And it's probably a reason why Jaden Daniels didn't find a way to win a national championship, was because his defense couldn't help him out on anything. He moved the ball plenty fine, and then he'd find himself in a 3-point game with Arkansas or something like that. And so, if we really want to come and place blame on anyone from LSU, we shouldn't be talking about Nussmeier. And Nussmeier didn't play a perfect game, right? We're talking about the bad pick. He made a couple mistakes. He did some things wrong. He wouldn't tell you that's his perfect game, but you shouldn't have to have a perfect quarterback game to win football games, right? You shouldn't have to say, like, oh, my quarterback needs to play at a Heisman Trophy level, or I'm not a good enough coach to win games, right? You have to find ways to coach up your defense and find a way to make that better. And so this isn't to say that, there isn't room for improvement. Like I was saying, I think a lot of teams right now are saying we'd like to improve. We'd like to find ways to, find ourselves in a better position later in the season. But right now, LSU survive and advance, find ways to get better. There's certainly room for improvement, but there's plenty more on the defense, I think, than on the offense.
LSU's offensive line, also, I don't think it's not what we were thinking it was going to be. They gave up 5 sacks. South Carolina's line gave up 6 sacks. So Yeah, just a very sloppy game all around. Trey, you let it off by saying not really impressed with either side. South Carolina is really going to struggle to make a bowl game. Their schedule's brutal. LSU looks like a prototypical 8-4 team. Good, not great. Has their moments, but they're going to find a way to lose a couple games as well. Pivotal game happened in the Swamp today. Really felt like a watershed moment for these two programs. Texas A&M wins 33-20 over Florida. I think we can all agree, maybe not even that close. Texas A&M left some points on the board. Florida got a couple of points late. It was a sloppy game, wet. It was a downpour in the first quarter and actually into the second quarter as well. We had a lightning delay in this game. But Marcel Reed was the big story for Texas A&M. He gets his first career start, redshirt freshman. Connor Wegman ruled out with an AC joint sprain. I was nervous going into this game with Connor Wegman. When you told me that the backup was starting, I really got nervous. But I'll tell you what, the redshirt freshman stepped up, didn't make any mistakes really in this ball game, and Texas A&M ran for over 300 yards on the ground. They looked like the better team, head and shoulders above Sunbelt Billy and the Gators. And guys, it's another example of how Florida cannot defend home field with Billy Napier as their head coach. It's another example of how they watch an opponent come in, be more physical, be faster, be better, stronger, etc. And Mike Elko gets a statement win early in his Aggie tenure. Billy Napier, I don't know how he saves his job at this point. Basically, every day that he's still employed at the University of Florida, I'm a little bit surprised.
Yeah, this was, I think, as much as it was a signature win that you can throw on Mike Elko, obviously winning a road game for the first time at A&M since 2021,
Yep.
and finding a way to do it in a lot of style as well. They're, pick six in this one, and then, a massive bomb of a touchdown, 73-yard touchdown pass, which actually, by the way, I wanted to bring this up as well. Can either of y'all guess the last time there was a touchdown pass of this length or longer at Texas A&M?
I'm going to guess it was 2013 Mike Evans or Johnny Manziel to Mike Evans.
That was longer. So there was the last I found, I combed through all of the game records. Back in 2017, Kellen Mond hit Christian Kirk for an 81-yarder against Arkansas. So that was
Arkansas. That's right.
Yeah. So that was the only time that we've seen a longer one. There have been a couple that came close under Jimbo, but this is already the longest pass since before the Jimbo Fisher era to score. So that's I think a big step in the right direction. Clearly the offense was working for Texas A&M. Clearly things had gotten better. And I think it even starts in the first drive. Like you watch that first drive and Marcel Reed finds ways to extend plays. There's problems, there's trouble, and he just finds a way to get out of the pocket, find a guy downfield and keep the chains moving. I think from that point on, Florida was kind of just eyes on the quarterback and kind of got a little bit nervous about what the quarterback was going to do. That really opened some stuff up in the run game. And that big 99-yard drive where they just run the ball the whole time through a rainstorm and, it's just pouring down. You're playing old school rugged football. Offensive linemen are hitting guys and falling on guys and double teams and seals and crack blocks and everything else. It was a lot of fun to watch just as a, kind of hard-nosed expose on how football should be played. But as much as this was, I think, a pivotal win for the Aggies and set a bunch of stuff straight, and you can kind of forget about the Notre Dame game at this point and keep moving. As much as that's true, this was also the signature loss of the Billy Napier era. I think this is the one that puts the nail in the coffin. I was in a couple of live streams earlier with some Florida people, and man, the vibes are in the toilet for the Florida fan base. I feel really bad for a lot of the fans that just want to kind of find their way back to some Florida glory days. But man, it is a rough time to be a Florida Gator fan right now. And some of the guys that were more connected into the program are saying it's no longer a matter of if, but when. There was a guy that apparently called the previous, I think, Mullins firing, and he said that he'll be fired maybe as early as Monday. So there's a chance we get a firing pretty quick of Billy Napier. I wouldn't be surprised if by the time this video comes out from the Supercut, that will be, a little bit dated on that, and Napier will have been fired. So there's a chance that could happen. But no, it's unfortunate times for Florida. They didn't really do anything well. They swapped their quarterbacks at weird times. Mertz would look good, and then they bring in DJ, and he would struggle. And then, even if DJ got a little momentum, then they'd bring Mertz back in for the next one, and he'd go out there and kind of they'd flounder a little bit. It just wasn't a great day for Florida. Just a really long slog of a game for pretty much everyone involved. But A&M came out; they looked really good. Elko gets a win on the road. Elko gets a win after hearing a lot of stuff about not winning on the road and not being able to win games that matter, and the offense is still a problem, and nobody can stop the run and everything else. And they flipped the script on a lot of those questions. I'm excited to see where it goes here for A&M. I still don't know if this was just a good performance because it was Florida, or if this was actually just a legitimately good performance, and this will stand up. So maybe we'll see in a couple weeks, and maybe Bowling Green puts up a test next week. But I think the Arkansas game in a couple weeks will tell us a lot more about A&M and what they can do this year.
Yeah, Trey, the offensive game plan for Florida was extremely confusing. It never really felt like we had a firm idea of who was going to play quarterback when. For the Gators, on the other hand, Texas A&M's offensive game plan was very simple, but they executed it, and it was run right through the Gators' front. We talked about the offensive line play in the preview show, how important that was going to be for Texas A&M, especially going on the road, an SEC environment. This was a prove-it moment. Take it wherever you want. You want to talk A&M's offensive line, their run domination, Florida's quarterback play, dealer's choice.
Yeah, I'll hit both. I'll start with Florida because this was just a damning indictment on Billy Napier's tenure at Florida for me. Just watching him mismanage that quarterback situation. He said in the SEC teleconference this week, I caught this on the radio when I was driving home one day. He said it was explicitly said it was not going to be a drive for drive alternation. I don't know if he just said that to throw everyone off the scent, but he specifically said, I can go back and find the quote where he said, we have a plan. We're going into this with a plan. It will not be a drive-to-drive alternation. It was a drive-to-drive alternation.
And that was
the stupidest way to work in two quarterbacks. That is the absolute dumbest possible way to work in two quarterbacks. You deserve to get fired on Monday for that decision alone. That is idiotic, moronic. There's not enough words in the syllabus or the thesaurus for me I'll teach a dang class on it and have a syllabus. There's not enough words in the thesaurus for me to say how dumb that was, because neither one got rhythm. Neither one could get in the groove of the game, and neither one was getting to play to their strengths. DJ Lagway is clearly not ready to face an SEC caliber defense. He looked great against Samford. Get him out there for a couple packages. Do what he does best. Let him throw a couple bombs downfield with a little pressure. Let him run a little bit. Come up with some packages, what it sounded like you were saying in the SEC teleconference this week. Now for A&M, the offensive line is real, man. I'm ready to say that through 3 games. Big improvement on the offensive line. Can't say enough about what the staff has been able to do. And a unit that was just putrid for 2 straight years, maybe even 3 straight years, going back to 2021. And I just can't say enough about the improvement they have. They took over this game on that 99-yard drive. It was a 15-play drive, 99 yards, took over 7 minutes of game clock, and they passed the ball twice, guys. One was a targeting penalty and one was an incomplete pass. So just absolute domination by the Texas A&M offensive line. The running game really knocked it out of the park. Florida had no answer for it. And credit to Colin Klein, too, for coming up with a scheme that was just confusing those linebackers. They didn't know which way to go. There was motion on almost every play. Mm-hmm. Everything you've been wanting as a Texas A&M fan from the offensive side of the ball, you got today. It was just a cathartic, awesome experience as a Texas A&M fan to watch that offense today.
What I saw, X's and O's wise, Florida's linebackers, boy, there are some names in that linebacking core. Shamar James, Grayson Pup Howard. They're not good at run defense. Texas A&M whipped them and
is it scheme? Is it players not following the scheme? Who knows? But it's a problem.
They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Every single counter that A&M ran, and in the second half, especially, it got to the point where it was student body left, student body right. I mean, Marcel Reed would just alternate which side he was handing the ball off to, and they ran that counter sometimes on repeat, and it didn't matter. I mean, the linebackers had either no idea where to be or just were not put in the right position to execute that scheme. I mean, I think there are so many issues on this Florida staff. It may be the most mismanaged team in the country. I've said that before on this podcast. I've said this before on this live show. But yeah, the Aggies came out and they did what they needed to do to get a win. I will say one thing I'm very concerned about, not necessarily next week against Bowling Green, although this is typically a script for how you get upset by a G5 team, penalties. Penalties for the Aggies were a real issue. They lost Dalton Brooks, their starting strong side safety, to targeting again. So he will be out for the first half of next week's game against the Falcons. 13 penalties for 110 yards. 25 of those yards came on one play when they had a holding penalty and an unsportsmanlike conduct foul on TJ Shanahan afterwards. So yeah, this Aggie team, they're playing with some more grit, a little bit more spice. I think you could see some of the Ags jawing with Florida players after a big hit, after getting a big stop. That's been missing over the last couple of years. It felt like the Aggies were kind of void of all emotion under Jimbo, unless Jimbo was, screaming at a quarterback. But they do need to be careful because, boy, when you play better opponents that are more buttoned up than the Gators, these games hang in the balance. And you want to put a game on a knife's edge, you commit a bunch of penalties, give up a bunch of free yards, and ruin drives. That'll get you in trouble in a hurry. So I need to see them clean that up. But an impressive win. We'll close on this. Next week is Bowling Green. Then you've got Arkansas after that, who struggled with UAB. So maybe not world beaters over there in Fayetteville. Call your shot. Who's the starting quarterback? If all else is equal, if Connor is healthy next week, who's the starting quarterback for Texas A&M against the Bowling Green Falcons?
It looked like Marcel Reed won the team today to me, just looking at how they interact on the sidelines. And that's not to say anything poorly of Connor Wegman. He was on the sideline. They showed him a few times, hyping everybody up, giving high fives, like doing what you'd hope the starter that's injured would do. But, man, if you just look at the sideline, it looked like Marcel Reed won the team and provided a nice little spark today. I wouldn't be shocked if it's him going forward.
Yeah, I think probably, assuming everything's equal and Connor's healthy and can go, I think he'll probably play, and I think that you can kind of use Bowling Green to kind of evaluate both guys, and see that I wouldn't be shocked if it's
probably use Arkansas too, honestly.
Yeah. Because
thrown out there.
Because the thing that you don't want to do here, right? You don't want to say, "Hey, Marcel Reed played really well against kind of bottom of the SEC competition." But also, let's not completely overreact to it. It's not like he, was out there throwing for 300, 400 yards and 5 touchdowns or anything. Like, he had a good day, right? He had a good day. He provided a spark. He gives you something else in this game. He's good with his legs. He can extend plays, I think, a little better than Connor can and roll out a little bit better and, find guys down the field. I think Connor's a better pocket passer, but, I mean, for better or worse, like Marcel did something today that was good, whereas Connor, he hasn't necessarily done anything wrong, but he hasn't done anything right either. Like Marcel did something right today where he got the team energized. He provided the spark, like you were saying, Trey. And I mean, for that, you're not going to completely take him out of that spot. And so I think the worst thing you can do is mismanage a QB situation. And, A&M fans will think, back to 2015 on that one. So I don't think that this is the same dynamic by any means, but worst thing you can do is mismanage a QB situation. I think if you're the Aggies, the good news for you today is that you have a proof of concept that one of your quarterbacks can run this offense well. Maybe Connor Wigman can do it better. Maybe we'll find out that he can do it better in practice and everything else, and as we see the season go along. But right now, we know that at least one of the quarterbacks in that A&M locker room can run this offense and do a good job with it. And that should make Aggie fans excited because you really haven't had that since Kellen Mond found a way to run Jimbo's archaic offense. And, and even then, like, the offense wasn't really humming. It didn't look as fun as it did today. It referenced my 73-yard touchdown stat. It didn't happen under Jimbo. So it's been a little while since the offense has looked this fun.
Gators Online has reported that the University of Florida Board of Trustees has called a meeting for Sunday morning.
Probably need to approve some new carpet or something.
Sure,
yeah,
surely.
Probably a facilities thing.
Yeah, new LED lights, I'm sure, in the office.
New carpet for what they're going to do to Billy and his. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't think that Billy Napier is going to be employed come Monday morning. I doubt. I would also.
Billy.
I would also go with Marcel Reed for the record. I think the momentum is real, and you got to pick a quarterback. And boy, Reed looked good in the offense. So he's got to go prove it next week and the week after that. I don't think that he, like you said, Garrett, has done anything tremendous based on one game, but he didn't make a mistake and he looked comfortable in the offense. Sometimes that's all you need.
Let him rock.
Missouri 27, Boston College 21. Trey, I'm looking at the box score, and I'm going to read some numbers here, and I'm going to ask you to explain why Missouri didn't blow Boston College out. Total yards, 440 in favor of Missouri, 298 for Boston College. Third downs, 11 of 19 for Missouri, 4 of 12 for Boston College. Passing, 264 to 249. Rushing, which we thought Boston College would probably have the edge in, 176 for the Tigers, 49 for the Screaming Eagles. Time of possession, 35-46 for Missouri, 24-14 for Boston College. Oh, by the way, Boston College threw 2 interceptions in this game. How on earth was this a 6-point win for the Tigers and a cover for our Boston College Screaming Eagles?
Yeah, Boston College just really wouldn't go away in this game, and they fought till the end. Missouri kind of went in cruise control, it felt like, once they got up by about 10. And there were a lot of penalties in the second half for Missouri. You talk about penalties. They faced second and 55 at one point.
59.
Second and 59. Yeah. So that's a fun little play-by-play to read on the ESPN app if you want to go find that one. So yeah, I mean, penalties, a lot of undisciplined play in the second half. Luther Burden got an earful from Eli Drinkowitz at one point on the sidelines for a couple of penalties that he committed on that aforementioned drive. So yeah, a little sloppiness at the end, but Mizzou was in control of this one for most of the game. Boston College started hot. Mizzou had to come back in the first half, but once they took the lead, it was really kind of a crock-potting situation. They just maybe unplugged in the middle, I guess. So yeah, I'm not that concerned about Mizzou going forward. It was a take care of business week and move on the line for me.
Yeah, I mean, they beat a ranked opponent at home. It was an opponent that nobody expected to be ranked. So,
and Boston College kind of proved they belong. I was impressed with Boston College hanging around.
Castellanos threw the ball better than I expected him to against his secondary. I'll say this. I think Mizzou's rush defense, probably the most encouraging thing that comes out of this game for the Tigers. That and Brady Cook looked somewhat normal. He'd had a kind of a slow start through the first 2 weeks, but was solid this week. Luther Burden goes for over 110 in this game as well. Yeah, just handle your business, move on. Missouri, very likely they're undefeated going into a bye week and then a road trip to College Station a couple weeks from now to begin October. Let's go to the backyard brawl. Pitt 38, West Virginia 34. When West Virginia was up 10, I had a moment where I had company over, and I had a moment where I had to decide what was going to be on my second screen. And I decided, you know what? I think West Virginia's got this one in the bag. I'm going to make the switch. And lo and behold, Pitt comes back to score 14 with 3 minutes left. The sequence went like this, guys. They gave up West Virginia gave up a 5-play drive to make it 34-31. Okay, uncomfortable, but you know what? It's all going to be fine. Get a first down or two and the ball game's over. 3 plays and -7 yards later, they have to punt it back. Then they proceed to give up the game-sealing touchdown to Eli Holstein, who's a freshman, by the way, in his second straight rivalry game on just 6 plays. For those of you counting at home, that's 130-plus yards of drives in 11 plays in less than 3 minutes. Gary, this is an inexcusable loss for Neil Brown, and I know he earned a lot of good grace last year. Trey and I talked about that on the preview show. But the losses like this in key moments when the secondary has to step up, when the offense needs a first down, they seem to elude Neil Brown more often than not. Maybe that's anecdotal, but holy cow, this is a terrible loss for the Mountaineers, who are now 1-2.
Yeah, pretty ugly loss. Obviously, I think there are a lot more, kind of high hopes coming into this season for a lot of West Virginia fans. But it also feels like this game is always just kind of stupid, right? Like it feels like this game, always something really dumb happens. And, you think, okay, this is the way that the game's going. I understand. This makes sense. This is football. Everything's fine. And then you blink and something dumb has happened. And you're like, it's that funny shaped ball once again, making us all scratch our heads and go, how is this? But I mean, that's kind of rivalry games for you as well. But problem for West Virginia, they've had 2 little rivalry games to start this season, and they're on the losing side of both. Defense hasn't necessarily looked that good to start the season. And, now they enter conference play, and You got to maybe some of your opponents aren't quite as daunting as we maybe thought they were going into the season, right? You get a little Kansas-Oklahoma State duo to start, and then you go to Iowa State as well. You have a little bit of a tough, intro to your, Big 12 schedule. Obviously, it's going to finish a little bit easier, but I mean, look, it's time to start figuring some stuff out, or else, it's going to be back to the hot seat for Neil Brown, and he'll see if he can pull out a second straight Neil Brown syndrome or something like that. But it's fun. It's fun times in college football when you have games like this where just wonky, weird stuff happens. But it's time to clean it up if you're West Virginia, and you didn't do so good and you're out of conference to start your year. You're not coming in with a lot of momentum. But this isn't a bad team by any means. This is not a team that's poor. I still think that they can still get really good play this season. I think they're still going to be able to run the ball really well. Garrett Green, still a good quarterback. He didn't have a bad day necessarily. A couple bad picks, but it's not a terrible day by any means. It's kind of an average mediocre day, but that just didn't get it done on a day where things were kind of weird.
He could have had about 6 interceptions today.
That is fair.
He looked. I watched most.
He
of
was
game.
putting the ball in danger.
Terrible.
Let's be honest. There was some iffy moments.
I think I texted you guys. There was a drive maybe right at the start of the second half or the end of the first half. I can't remember, that he threw 2 or 3 passes in a row that should have been picked.
Yeah.
And one finally found the hands of the defender.
It was more about if Pitt's DBs actually had, hands to pull it off. But this is still a good West Virginia team, but they need to figure it out in a hurry because the Big 12 schedule is front loaded for them, and they're going to have to find ways to win games pretty quick.
See, I'm almost on the other side of the coin here. I don't know that West Virginia is as good as I thought they were going in. Garrett Green, certainly, I have my doubts. 16 of 30 today. Trey, you mentioned the multiple balls, kind of a little bit like Luke Altmaier from week 1, where it's like, okay, the box score says this. My eyes said he should have thrown, this number of interceptions.
That one Illinois fan is punching air right now, Mitch.
Hey, and they're 3-0. Congratulations to the Fighting Illini. They're 3-0.
Good job, Illini.
210 through the air, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Eli Holstein, redshirt freshman, 21 of 30, 301.
Baller, bro. Holstein looks really, really good.
Holstein is flourishing in this new look air raid for the Pitt Panthers. West Virginia's secondary came into the game. I don't think it's updated yet on CFBstats.com. 115th in the country in total yards, air yards given up. That's going to go obviously up after a terrible performance again today. They couldn't force a turnover while their counterparts were. And again, guys, penalties, they come back to bite the Mountaineers. Lots of penalties in this ballgame. Pitt had a ton of penalties as well. They kind of got away with it. West Virginia dominates time of possession. I mean, again, it's another area where you look at the box score and you go, how did West Virginia not win this game? But it's Pitt late, very similar to what they did against Cincinnati last week. Evidently, you can't count Pat Narduzzi's boys out. We were trying to do it in the preseason, and they just won't let us do it. So congratulations to Pitt. Well-earned backyard brawl victory. I'm concerned about West Virginia. Pitt, we'll see. Maybe they're
I'm in on Pitt. I'm on the record. I'm in on Pitt. A weak ACC that is wide open behind Clemson and Miami right now.
Yeah.
Could win a lot of games.
Maybe we dive into Pitt on Monday's episode. We'll see. We'll table that. Let's go to the Apple Cup in the Pacific Northwest. Washington State 24, Washington 19. Trey, the math had this one completely backwards. The advanced stats were in on Washington. They were out on Oregon. Oregon boat races Oregon State, and Washington State wins it outright. Mateers Privateers, baby. A goal line stand from the Cougars ends up getting this one done. In your mind, what does this mean for either team? Is there a conclusion that you can draw from this other than just, hey, really fun rivalry game with an unexpected result?
Yeah, I don't know that you can draw a ton. Obviously, if you're Washington, you're concerned that you didn't win a game when you have a decided talent advantage, and on paper, you should win the football game against your in-state rivals. But there's so much just intangibles in this first matchup as non-conference opponents that I'm willing to give Washington a pass. I said it on the preview show. I've been really impressed with what I've seen with Washington so far this year. This one was on Peacock, so I'll confess that I didn't watch as much of it live. It was kind of hard to flip back and forth between apps, but what I did catch, it wasn't necessarily a poor offensive performance for Washington, just not really able to finish drives off. And that's always going to bite you in these close rivalry games. When you get those opportunities, you've got to punch it in for 6. And Washington just couldn't do that consistently, and Washington State took advantage. So props to Washington State. This is a huge win for the program, huge going forward. They can point to this in recruiting. They can point to this in just pride in their program that they beat the team that left them behind. And that's just great for me. I love that. But I'm not pressing, DEFCON 1 on Washington for the rest of this year. I still think they have a lot ahead of them too.
Washington does feel a little bit better than I think maybe the rumors of their demise were a little exaggerated this offseason. But then again, with that much change, you just don't know until you see a product on the field. This feels like a game that they should have won. But again, rivalry game, ball doesn't bounce your way. Reload, go get them next week. Final game to kind of dive into before we get to a segment of what we're calling drive-by shots. There were so many performances today that just really earned a verbal shellacking. And so we're going to give those programs their due here in a minute. But Kansas State 31, Arizona 7. Guys, this game wasn't really close. It was tight for a little bit, but then Kansas State just started to pull away. Arizona's offense did not look as advertised. Their defense, what I did notice was their defense got blown off the ball. We talked about that in the preview show. They were one of the worst teams in the country in yards before contact that they were giving up. Is Kansas State now the Big 12 front runner? Utah didn't exactly look amazing today. Oklahoma State blows out Tulsa, but tell me where you're putting Kansas State in your Big 12 hierarchy and maybe where Arizona might slide for you now.
I can take it first, I guess, but
Sure.
Utah, I'm not too worried about. No Cam Rising today, and playing at an in-state G5 rival is always tricky. Obviously, Oklahoma State didn't make it look tricky today, but Utah State, I think, is ahead of where Tulsa is at this point. They're certainly in the top tier. I'd have to think about, maybe that's another exercise for the Monday show of ranking the tiers in the Big 12 right now and who's in that top tier. Because, UCF might have a case for that. We can talk about them in a little bit. Iowa State certainly has been impressive so far this year with their win against Iowa last week. So Kansas State is up there. I'd still probably put Utah when they're healthy ahead of them, but they're probably fighting for that second spot with Oklahoma State and a couple other teams for me. I think they figured out what they want to do with Avery Johnson, and that's great. Run him and let him mature as a passer, but let his legs settle him down, right? Yeah. And that's what he's best at right now, and that's what gives you the best chance to win. That ground game is scary when it's clicking, and that's your best card. You got to play your best card to win the hand, and that's their best card at this moment.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, Kansas State's probably up there in my top 2 right now. This is assuming that Utah gets Cam Rising back and he's healthy and he can be the difference maker that he is. If not, then Kansas State's probably the team right now that I trust the most, just because they've looked the best so far, right? There have been issues. I wasn't necessarily impressed with Oklahoma State last week against Arkansas. Obviously, if Utah doesn't have Cam Rising, they're just not the same caliber team. And there's not really a lot of other teams I've been that impressed with so far. But Kansas State, for me, is doing an interesting thing. Trey, you mentioned the whole, they figured out how they want to use Avery Johnson. This doesn't seem sustainable to me. I don't believe that this can work over the course of the year unless he can really find his arm. And yeah, he threw for 2 touchdowns and 156. It wasn't a poor day necessarily, but I just feel like they're going to have to pass the ball more if they want to get through this schedule unscathed. And I maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm just totally off, and they're just going to be able to run this guy. Go Avery Johnson left, Avery Johnson right, and just kind of do their thing. But for me, I just want to see it a little bit more. And I do believe the arm can develop. I just hope it can develop this year, because it seems like the progress he's making has not necessarily been the best. And I think I mentioned it. There's a play where a guy springs open. You can see he's got the guy beat. He just kind of loads up and chucks it 10 yards past him. And it was just very high school football to me, where the quarterback sees the receiver breaking open. He's like, oh, I got him. He just throws it as far as he can. It kind of felt like that to me a little bit. And I don't know if he's just got the eyes get super wide. He's like, ooh, open receiver, here we go. Or And I don't know what it is, but he's got to refine some of that for me before I really believe they can take that step and be that top team. But again, I'm willing to go ahead and say that I'm wrong. I've been wrong before, and I'm willing to say that I could be wrong about this. If Kansas State wants to run this guy into the ground, be my guest. It seems like it's working for you so far, so don't fix what ain't broke, right?
17 carries a week probably isn't sustainable, but I think they can do enough to balance that going forward. There's just not a defense really that scares me outside of Utah.
Sure.
And do they play? I can't remember. Do they play Utah in the regular season? I don't think they do.
Check. No, they don't get Utah regular.
Yeah, so I think there's
they
just
got
not really
Oklahoma State at home. They go
not a
to West
defense that scares
Virginia.
me.
They play Kansas. They're not as good as we thought. Maybe Arizona State. Arizona State's all right, but
not a defense.
And they do finish obviously with Iowa State, so that's a pretty solid defense. But
yeah, so until they play Iowa State, not really a defense that terrifies me.
Right. Yeah. But so, I mean, he's not built like his frame isn't built for that many carries a game, regardless of who you're playing. Like you're going to take a hit from a linebacker against somebody in week 7 or 8 or 9. If you're going to carry this thing 17 times a game, you're going to take a hit that's going to sideline you for a couple weeks. So they need to find a way to develop the passing, maybe get some other running backs involved. Obviously, DJ Giddens with a pretty good day, but probably need a little bit more out of the running backs if they're going to just rely on the ground that much.
I think I don't know what Dylan Edwards' final stat line was, but I thought he
41 and he had a punt return touchdown.
And he had the punt return touchdown. Yeah, I mean, 40 total carries. Yeah, you need to limit Avery Johnson for sure.
He can't have half of those carries.
Yeah. Kansas State's defense looked a whole lot better.
That was the story for me.
Yeah, they kept Fafita in a box. They didn't let Arizona get going on the ground. I was very impressed with what the Wildcats did defensively. That's what they're going to have to, I think, hang more of their hat on as they go throughout the rest of the season, because if they look like Tulane in the game against Tulane, they're going to drop a couple contests. But if they conversely play very, very solidly like they did against Arizona, Kansas State's looking really good to maybe win a conference championship, go to the playoff. All right. So now if you are in the live show and you're wondering, guys, you are 52 minutes in and you haven't mentioned Florida State yet. Well, here's your time.
We don't talk about 0-3 teams at the top. Sorry.
It's very, very true. Typically that we don't make our headlines off of teams that start 0-3 for just the third time in program history. But by golly, they're leading off the drive-by shot segment. Florida State falls to 0-3 for the third time in program history. It is the second such time under Mike Norvell. Guys, I am willing to say that I might have been wrong about Mike Norvell, that I might have gotten lucky.
Travis that was lifting him up a little bit.
Must have been, because his record without Jordan Travis is abhorrent. I'm very concerned about this Florida State program. They looked disinterested with the game of football in the first half against Memphis. They came back a little bit in the second, but I texted you as they were on that drive. DJ Uiagalelei, maybe the last quarterback in the country that I want leading my team down with 45 seconds or less. It was just honestly depressing to watch this Noles team play. Memphis, good on them. I didn't think they looked tremendous today. They looked overmatched at times. And again, that was with the Florida State team that was making mistakes left, right, and center. But they found a way to get it done. Seth Hennigan gets another career win, his 40th straight game with at least one touchdown pass thrown. So Memphis is looking really good now to maybe even be undefeated. If they can run the table, beat Tulane, they can certainly lock up that G5 playoff spot. It's all on the table for them. But Florida State looked terrible. Garrett, Michigan, offensively, what they've got with Davis Warren ain't it, man. On one hand, he did not have a pass touch the ground. On the other hand, 3 of those passes went to the wrong color jersey. And, oh, by the way, their opponent was Arkansas State.
Yeah. On the other hand, he might have preferred some of those passes hit the ground. So, it's Michigan's offense needs some work. It's pretty clear that something isn't working, which is really kind of surprising because Sherrone Moore's supposed to be, kind of the guy leading that up, but maybe head coaching is a little bit too much for him at this point. I don't know if it's true or not. I mean, I don't want to judge the guy this, couple days in or a couple games into his job, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think that this is it right now. They're going to need to find a way to reload. They really need to try to capitalize on some brand and go hit the portal a little bit because, I think if they can develop a little stability, they can actually get better players. I think this is a personnel issue, right? Like McCarthy developed in the offense in previous years, but he had time. He had several talented running backs who could kind of run this thing. Now you kind of got one. Like, this is a personnel issue, right? Like, this is just Michigan doesn't have the guys back there that they used to. And, unless they're going to find a way to get those guys back through, transfer portal in the future or maybe just development through the year, Michigan could fall off a little bit here and be looking for another new coach in a few years.
Can I go back to Florida State just really quickly?
Sure.
Because to me, that looked like a team that quit on their coach today and a team that's ticked off that the quarterback change hasn't been made. And I think if you want to save the season and make a run, it sounds stupid to say make a run at an ACC title, but if you want to save the season and maybe save your job, Mike Norvell, now's the time to throw a quarterback change at the wall because it's the only way you can get the team back.
I can't believe they haven't gone to Brock Glenn. I mean, Uyunglele, I tweeted out one of the interceptions that he threw. It's just so bad right now.
His first one might have been his worst throw of his career.
It was terrible. It was like jackpot, that game that you play when you're a little kid, just throwing the ball up. I mean, it was a balloon ball. I think his arm got hit as he was coming forward, but it still, at best, was going to be a throw down the middle of the field late into double coverage. It's not good for Florida State. And I think your point of quitting on Mike Norvell, a coach that they handed a fat extension this offseason, a defensive coordinator that they handed a fat extension this offseason. This program is in some serious trouble, and I don't know that it is going to get all that much better anytime soon. Trey, take your shot at any one of the teams that got annihilated by a G5 team today. Which one stuck out to you? Which one would you like to give a shout out to?
Oh man, there's a couple on here that I'm not going to kick some of these programs because they just don't deserve it.
I'll kick them later.
Okay. Let's talk UCLA. Let's talk UCLA because that means I get to look smart by saying Indiana's really good at football, and also UCLA is down bad. And do they win another game this year? I haven't looked at their schedule. I'll pull up their schedule right now and read it to you guys, and you guys tell me who you think they'll actually beat. Someone stall for me while I get this.
Again, this UCLA team is the team that's traveling everywhere. This is the team that travels more than, I think, 26 NFL teams this year, despite 3 fewer road games for them. It's look, this is a team that's going to have to travel a lot, so it definitely doesn't put the win total any higher because of all that travel.
So we've got at LSU,
no,
Oregon,
no.
I have an ad that pulled up. Sorry, at Penn State.
No.
Minnesota at home.
Maybe.
At home, maybe.
At Rutgers.
Probably not.
No.
At Nebraska.
No.
Iowa at home.
No.
At Washington.
Yikes.
No.
USC at home.
No.
That would be the funniest one.
That one's gonna get ugly.
And then they close out the year with a weird game at home against Fresno State.
That's right. They played
Fresno State could win that game.
Currently, I think they're on commercial right now on my screen, but I think they're doing quite well this evening.
Yeah, they were doing well last I checked. Yeah.
I see a max of 1. I think they split that Minnesota and Fresno State game.
Yikes. It's not good. I mean, nothing's clicking for them. Offensively, they can't score. Defensively, they can't get a stop. Curtis Rourke put up 307 yards passing, 4 touchdowns on him today.
Yes,
Ethan Garbers is the starter for UCLA, 14 of 23 for $137. They ran for just 96 yards. They don't have anything. They really don't. There's not a single redeeming quality, I think, for this UCLA team this year.
For the fact that this was one of the teams that survived and kind of kicked off the Pac-12 apocalypse, for the fact that they get to leave and get to join a big conference and everything else, to not be ready for this and to not have guys in place to make this transition like awesome for you guys and get the Big Ten jump and recruit well and transfer portal well and everything else, that they clearly got caught flat-footed. This is an administration failure, not a, it's flowing down from the administration. It's not just on the coaching. It's not just on the players. Like, administration should have put them in a much better position to win because they're clearly just not there right now. So it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of where they are.
Elsewhere, Vandy drops to Georgia State. Yep. That's a bad loss. Rest in peace to our Vanderbilt dreams. Certainly seem like they've taken a hit. Toledo got paid $1.3 million to go and annihilate Mississippi State. 41-17, the final there. Guys, you know who Mississippi State plays next weekend, by the way?
I think Alabama? It's Texas, right?
Oh. It's Florida.
Oh, it's Florida. Oh.
A battle of the down bads in the SEC.
Oh, no.
That is going to be must-avoid TV if I've ever seen it.
If you don't like yourself, watch that game.
Yeah, that's for.
Does Billy Napier coach that game?
No,
right? He's done.
No, he's gone. He's gone tomorrow. He's
right.
Gone.
You'd think.
Notre Dame just handed Purdue the worst loss in program history today, 66-7. The Fighting Irish get the win, guys. We might have a controversy at quarterback in South Bend. Riley Leonard only throws for 112 yards. Steve Angeli comes in and suddenly looks like the savior of the program. The offense moved a whole lot better under him. Now, Riley Leonard had some rushing touchdowns, but if you read Notre Dame Twitter, they're very passive-aggressive towards Riley Leonard, which is confusing to me because, man, they celebrated like they won the Super Bowl when they got him out of the portal. But there's some real concern in Riley Leonard's ability to pass the ball down the field. I think it's something to keep an eye on, whether or not Notre Dame feels like they can reach their ceiling with their expensive transfer portal quarterback, or if they go with a guy that was on the roster all along anyway. Purdue, the Ryan Walters era, I don't know that it has that much longer to go. Graham Harrell, isn't Graham Harrell still their offensive coordinator, or has he moved on?
He might be.
Last I heard, he was still.
Yeah.
Last I heard, he was still the offensive coordinator there. Boy, I wish. I'm going to choose to remember him as Texas Tech's quarterback from the heyday, not whatever he's doing.
Harrell and Crabtree, and not any of this other stuff.
Yeah, not been good. Trey, our darling of the week, TCU blows a 21-point second-half lead to the Knights of UCF. We thought that this was one of those games that swings back in favor of TCU after everything went against them last year. Turned out that they couldn't get out of their own way, and KJ Jefferson came alive in the second half.
Yeah, KJ Jefferson had a big second half. It's just another damning game for Coach Dykes at TCU, I feel like. Ever since they lost that national championship game, it's just been really downhill. Lost a lot of games they shouldn't. But UCF, look out. They've got a nice little runway coming up, and they can make a run towards the top of the Big 12. And, yeah, KJ and that Gus Malzahn offense is just a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a question here. Like, obviously, Sonny Dykes not necessarily doing a whole lot, recently. Like, is that TCU team going to go down as one of the weirdest, anomalies in college football history? Because I don't, there's not even, there's a lot of NFL talent on that. I know, some guys have landed there, but it's not like, Max Duggan is, starting in the NFL as, one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. Or, I know that, their receiver is, kind of contributing, I guess, to the Chargers. But, I just don't, I don't understand what happened that season. And, even now, it just feels like it didn't happen or it wasn't real.
They got hot, had a lot of veterans. Is it truly a once in a decade? I don't know.
It's got to be a 30 for 30 on that sometime, because that was just nuts.
RJ Harvey, 29 carries for $180 on the ground for the Knights, 2 touchdowns. It wasn't Josh Hoover's fault for TCU. He throws for 402 yards, 4 touchdowns. Jack Besh, 9 catches for 200 yards and a touchdown. I mean, TCU was moving the ball. Their defense just couldn't stop the Knights.
They just have no defense. They have no defense whatsoever.
Oh, so frustrating for TCU fans, and obviously those of us that were back in the Frogs. That was a tough one to lose late. All right, let's wrap it on this. Let's hit some highlights from a couple of other games. Bama 42, Wisconsin 10. Trey, we did forget to preview this one, and our
No, we didn't. We don't preview games that are like 20-point spreads, and the pregame win probability for Wisconsin was like 7%.
Well, okay, so I'll say this. Didn't forget about
we should have previewed it. I'm just being silly.
It somehow didn't get on the run sheet. I had them on there at one point. I have no idea where they went. So
hey,
anyway,
I'll preview it for you real quick. Alabama good, Wisconsin not very good. Might be close for a little bit, but Alabama will run away. Did that happen?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
There you go. There's your preview and recap.
Big deal that came out of this. Tyler Van Dyke's career might be over. He went down with a non-contact injury in the first quarter, I think.
It was the first drive, and it was a promising drive for Wisconsin. Whatever they had scripted up was working. They were moving the ball down the field. Tyler Van Dyke scrambled and pulled up right before he went out of bounds and immediately grabbed his leg. Just hate to see it.
I hate that. That absolutely stinks. Jalen Milroe, 5 total touchdowns. He joins a very exclusive company, Garrett, with his performance today. Couple of passing touchdowns, couple of rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, the stat graphic they pulled up on, I think was this Fox. I can't remember where this was,
Fox.
But the graphic they pulled up, they had quarterbacks that had 2 passing touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns in 3 straight games. Going back to 2008, it's Tim Tebow in 2008. Colin Kaepernick did it. Jordan Lynch and Johnny Manziel both did it in 2012. And now Jalen Milroe, the first quarterback since 2012 to have 2 passing and 2 rushing in 3 straight games. Guys, I think Jalen Milroe might be kind of inside track towards the Heisman right now. I think there's kind of a lot of guys that have been good. I mean, obviously there's some other guys that are contention right now and it's still early, but I mean, he is doing it all for Alabama right now and honestly probably floating them right now through some games that they maybe didn't deserve to win. Also really like the receiver they got, that freshman receiver. He, caught a couple of long balls there. Looks really promising. I think if that could be a connection, that could be the next kind of Bama, QB wide receiver connection for him there. So the rumors of Bama's demise, I think, have been greatly exaggerated. They're still pretty good.
Milroe's got to get a little bit better with his mid-range accuracy, especially it feels like 3rd and 7 to like 3rd and 12. Like kind of expect an overthrow from Jalen Milroe. On the other hand, there's the F it, Ryan Williams is down there somewhere strategy that is also paying off.
And it works out, and it's going to work out a lot more than it doesn't this year.
Yeah. Tide host Georgia this upcoming week, so we'll watch that. Oregon gets right against Oregon.
2 weeks. I think it's a bye week for Georgia next.
Yeah, they have a bye week next week.
Oh, is it bye week, 2 weeks, week 5?
Yeah, but it's the next game, yeah.
Good clarification there. Oregon gets right against Oregon State, 49-14. We were worried about the Beavers running rampant against an Oregon defense that had looked lackadaisical at times. On the running side, certainly didn't happen. The Beavers were held in check. Gabriel looked really smooth, 306 through the air, a couple of touchdowns, and the Ducks run for 240 in a net crack game. Oklahoma wins 34-19. They kicked the cover field goal very, very late in that ball game. Guys, the issue here with this one for me, Tulane didn't look outstanding. They really had multiple opportunities, I think, to keep this within a 1-score deficit or even win this game outright. The issue for me continues to be the offensive line for Oklahoma and the fact that in the end, Jackson Arnold kind of put on Superman's cape and went, I have to do this myself. It ended up, I've forgotten how many rushes Jackson Arnold had, but it ended up being Arnold left, Arnold right, scrambling to move the chains. That doesn't seem sustainable given the fact that Tennessee gets ready to roll in here in a couple of weeks and they have a loaded SEC schedule upcoming as well.
Yeah. Much has been made about Oklahoma's schedule, and I didn't see a ton against Tulane that makes me more confident that they're going to challenge that schedule. And that Tennessee game is going to be, I just don't know that their offense is built to keep up with Tennessee's offense right now. We'll talk about them in just a second, but it's scary if you're an Oklahoma Sooner fan.
Yeah, they came out better than expected, but I think it's just because expectations were kind of low, right? I think after what they did against Houston, the expectations were just kind of in the toilet for Oklahoma. Jackson Arnold has 169 passing in this game, 97 rushing, led the team in rushing by about 40 yards. So, he's going to have to kind of do it all. The problem, though, is, I don't think he's at that level right now. Some teams have been able to get by with just, hey, our quarterback's going to be our stud. I don't think he's at that level yet. Maybe he could be. Maybe he'll develop to that point this season. He's not there right now, and he ain't there for Tennessee. So, yeah, it's tough sledding ahead. Sooners, at least you got the 3 to start the year.
Potentially developing situation with Quinn Ewers' health down on the 40 acres. Texas handles UTSA easily 56-7. This game was never close. The issue, though, is Quinn Ewers exit with an oblique injury. It's an oblique strain is what they anticipate it being. Guys, I don't know if you've ever had something like that, but boy, that is a nagging injury. It's painful, not fun. Makes it really hard to be an elite level athlete. The good news for Texas is that Arch Manning came in and looked excellent against lower competition, albeit, but boy, he was efficient. I think 11-14, 270 plus yards, 4 touchdowns through the air. The quarterback position at Texas is certainly secure going forward. The question will be, does Arch have to step up and be the guy over the interim, maybe in the next couple of weeks? From what I saw today, the way he was poised and the way that he most importantly handled the pocket, knowing when to stay in, when to move, I think Texas would be just fine. Barely any drop off at all if Arch has to play.
Yeah, and they have a nice little schedule for the next couple weeks. If Arch does have to play, it's ULM and Mississippi State. Not too worried about either of those games if they put me out there at quarterback for the Texas Longhorns. So it'll be a good test. And if Arch plays well, maybe you have some controversy brew up before that Oklahoma game. I don't know.
Wally Pipp.
Yeah, but
Quinn doesn't need a backup.
Yeah, Quinn always finishes a season, right?
But sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, you're right about the whole not being worried about, you being out there, any of us being out there, because you can pretty much just flip it into the flats and watch the receivers go burr. They're very fast. And so this is pretty much just receivers go burr for Texas is what they do. My concern would only be if they have to extend this later into the season. I'm sure that he'll be able to ramp up and get his feet wet and, be fine. Obviously, he played well against a UTSA team that I don't think any of us think is very good right now, but it's more if it goes into, Oklahoma, Georgia part of the schedule that I start to get concerned more about the long term for Texas for this season and saying like, okay, well, if this is an oblique thing that, those can get really tricky and, obliques can, re-aggravate at a weird time because you sneeze weird, right? Like it can be a weird thing. And so, hoping for a quick recovery for him because I think we all want to see Ewers out there to get Texas best product. But at the same time, it's going to be on Arch to step up, especially if it gets into those harder games in the schedule, sort of in that middle part of the schedule.
A couple closing thoughts here. Cincinnati, congrats to them. They reclaimed the victory belt. Also, Garrett, as you mentioned, they claim the all-time lead in the rivalry, 61-60-7 over Miami of Ohio. Defense for Miami of Ohio, very solid. Gave up some late points, I believe, but boy, they just can't get anything going offensively. Nice bounce back for Cincinnati after the loss to Pitt last week. Always feels good to get a rivalry game in hand. Tennessee blows out Kent State. They had 65 points at the half, guys. And the funniest note from this game, at the half, the officials got together and said, Kent State, would you like to shorten this game, running clock, shorter quarters?
We signed up for 60, baby.
Kent State said we signed up for 60.
I didn't hear no bell.
71-0, I believe, was the final score.
So. And that felt like mercy too. Like it felt like they're like, all right, fine. I don't want to keep hitting you. They actually attempted and possibly even I didn't see if they recovered or not. They attempted an onside up 30 with like 3 minutes left in the first quarter. Like Tennessee, y'all are bullying at this point. Stop it. Just stop it. We know you're good. Okay, stop it.
Josh Heupel is practicing for their date in Norman in a couple of weeks.
If this is like eye test stuff for later in the year for making the playoff, like we get it. You're good. You're going to pass the eye test. Chill out. Don't bully Kent State.
Last game that we have on our run sheet, I don't know, maybe we talk about this more on Monday as well. Arizona State wins a big game against Texas State Thursday night, 31-28. Trey, this was kind of your personal game of the week. This was a blast to watch. It was good competition. Texas State comes up just shy in the end. What were your major takeaways from this?
Yeah, two really fun teams and two teams I'm really excited to watch the rest of the year. I think Texas State just kind of ran out of gas towards the end there and made a couple mistakes that proved I think they had a fumble and an interception late that just kind of proved to be killer. Set Arizona State up with a couple short fields. And just a rough ending for Texas State. It looked like a great night in San Marcos. It's hard to have a bad night in San Marcos. But, I'm really excited about both of them going forward. I mentioned top tier of the Big 12. We might need to start talking about Arizona State towards that top tier. Really excited to see how high they can go in the conference standings this year.
I do have to remind everybody, though, that because I saw this on Twitter, folks were discussing Arizona State as a Big 12 championship contender, and maybe could they get into, whatever part of the postseason they wanted to compete for. Arizona State has a self-imposed bowl ban this year for the transgressions of the Herm Edwards administration. So would it be unprecedented for them to go, you know what, let's push that back a year or two?
I mean, if they're in playoff contention, I bet there has to be a clause in there. It's like, well, actually,
I don't know. I mean, it's at the school's discretion, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean,
they could probably do whatever they want, and it would take the NCAA months to rally up with some course of action. I mean, that's just what they do.
That could be part of it, because if you're not competing, you get it out of the way. But if you're going to compete and then you decide to take it off real quick at like the last second, you could be in a situation where, like, if you win the Big 12, or if you're even in that game, just repeal that ban and say, go ahead, put us in this thing. We're gonna compete in the playoff. And it's really interesting. It would be interesting to see if they stuck to it, though. I'm sure this wouldn't happen, but if they won the Big 12 and then just said, nope, we're sitting out the bowls, we're not doing it, it's a good season. It'd be really funny to see how the committee handles that now that you have another like power conference champion that wouldn't get put in that spot. Like,
you'd have to. We
given Memphis and Boise first round buys. Like, what are we doing here?
That's true. That's a great point. I'm kind of.
That'd be really fun.
Now.
James Madison on steroids. That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
All right, guys, it's late. Let's wrap it there. Appreciate everyone that stopped by in the live show tonight. We told you week 3 was going to be great. It certainly was. We can't wait for weeks 4, 5, and on down the line. Of course, if you've stopped by, if you're listening to this on the podcast, watching it on the YouTube side, we've got a new episode that'll come out on Monday, or I guess Tuesday morning, as Trey leads an extracurricular discussion where we're in the middle of rebranding it. We'll say that right now. Seems like the leftovers is a popular concept in the college football podcasting space right now. So you'll see the new graphic, the new title of that segment, but we'll talk to you again on Monday and then have the show preview come out on Thursday morning as scheduled. For Trey Reeves and Garrett Turney, I'm Mitch Mason. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Until next time, so long, everybody.
Gracious, how about